Aliens Explored is a podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions and other strange events from both a believing and a sceptical perspective whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it?
In the 1920s, the discovery of an ancient city at Mohenjo Daro in Pakistan gave evidence of a civilization more than 4,000 years old to rival those known in Egypt and Mesopotamia. A number of archaeologists and researchers, including David Davenport, have uncovered startling evidence of some kind of atomic war. But could it be that this ancient civilization had the means to split the atom, or could it have been otherworldly intervention? Join myself and Neil on Aliens Explored as we explore the ancient city of Mahenjo Daro.
Hello listeners and welcome back to Aliens Explored, your weekly podcast exploring those unexplainable, inexplicable phenomena of the skies. This week we're going to be looking at Mohenjo Daro, the lost city that was discovered in Pakistan in the 1920s after having been lost for thousands of years. I'm one of your hosts, Neil Kelly.
And I'm your other host, Stu Jackson. And yeah, this is a really interesting one. So it's not so much Mahenjo Daro itself, but more that there is evidence, it seems, of an atomic explosion, which if thousands of years ago, that's got to be alien intervention, right?
Has it? Has
Yes.
it got to be alien intervention?
No, I hope you enjoyed the podcast there this week, folks. No, I think we can go a bit deeper into it than that.
Yes, there is research to say that they found evidence that looked like something like a Nagasaki type bomb was used in. They found evidence of it in writings of enormous blasts more brilliant than 1,000 suns were recorded, just as cadavers consumed to the point that they were unrecognisable, and numerous different sections fitting the profile of an atomic assault. And it seems to actually mentioned in a religious text.
It's mentioned in a couple of religious texts, but before we come on to that, other pieces of evidence that it was in fact an atomic or similar device is the people who did survive. There are reports of them losing their fingernails, losing their hair. There's reports of the water and food in the area becoming polluted and causing people to be ill, all of which screams out radioactive fallout. On top of that, in Jodhpur, you had, or not far from Jodhpur, they found a layer of cinder. So this is a layer of sort of combustible material that's basically gone out, that was really highly radioactive. They've found high levels of radioactivity within Mohenjo Daro itself that couldn't be explained. They found rocks that had been glassified because they've been raised to temperatures around 1,500 degrees Celsius. Now, it's like, something... And also, I mean, you do get these things naturally. You get them in volcanoes. That can happen. But of they reckon it was about 35,000 people who lived in Mohenjo Daro. They've only found 44 skeletons. And those people looked like they were sort of spreading in a panic, like this was a sudden event. Not dissimilar to Pompeii, where people were just caught unawares by the disaster. The sort of the positioning of these skeletons suggested that this was a sudden and unexpected thing, which you wouldn't get with a volcano. You get lots of warning normally. I mean, I'm using Pompeii as an example, so I'm contradicting myself there. But usually you'd get ground rumblings, you'd get, and Mahenjo Daro is not on a volcano, so there's that.
It's not a volcano. So volcanoes can sometimes surprise you. I'm thinking of the Mount St. Helens volcano in the northwestern United States in 1980. They knew it was going to blow, and they went to observe it. What they didn't expect was that it was actually, instead of spouting out the top, it was going to blow out the side of the mountain. So a lot of people who thought they were in a safe position realised far too late that actually they weren't. So even a volcano, but as you say, it's not volcanic here. Would an asteroid or meteorite strike cause that kind of devastation, or that type of devastation? I mean,
well, it caused mass destruction. You'd get a massive dust cloud, which, when we come on to the written reports later on, are mentioned.
I mean, you
wouldn't have the radioactivity.
You'd have a massive explosion, wouldn't you? You'd have the.
Oh yes.
I mean, I know they compare the devastation of a meteorite strike to countless atomic bombs, but it'd be like non-radioactive atomic bombs, wouldn't it?
Yes. I mean, they're talking in terms of destructive power rather than
because the heat
residue.
Because the heat in this case is caused by friction.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yes.
And compression.
Well, indeed. I mean, with Mahenjo Daro, what has happened there has been likened as basically mirroring what happened at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Yeah. So my first question to you, Neil, is: do you dispute then that it was an atomic explosion?
Well, I haven't found anyone saying, "Oh no, it's not."
Okay.
Yes, there are signs of bodies being burned, people dying.
You can always be the first.
I mean, I suppose. Yeah. I mean, I don't think finding a relatively small number of bodies is necessarily indicative of something happening very suddenly and totally destroying people. I mean, if you could have a pandemic that initially they're managing and burying the bodies, but as it starts to rage out of control, eventually they just say, "Fuck it, let's just go. Let's leave town." And I know there's a few bodies that are just lying there in their beds, but just leave them, just go. We've been overwhelmed.
I think that's true to a point, but I also think you'd end up with large burial sites which they've not found. I mean, they have quite extensively excavated this city because it was a massive find in 1922.
Yeah, I mean, it was
a huge find.
Was that the same year as Tutankhamun in Egypt?
It was around the same time. I don't know if it was the same year or not.
I mean, it's very much around the same time. It very much was the era of the pith-helmeted explorers with their native bearers finding lost cities. And what was the Petra? Is it Petra in Jordan? The lost city of Petra. I think that was discovered around that time as well.
Yeah.
So we're very much into J. Rider Haggard territory here.
But certainly, there have been massive excavations. So if there were sort of plague pits or mass burial sites, as you say, there would be evidence of that. Which there simply isn't. What you would get, though, is with an atomic blast, you'd get vaporization of bodies, which would explain why you don't get many.
Yeah.
So if it was that sudden, it just vaporized people.
What about the possibility that it's something that's sometimes mooted, that actually the planet is so old, there has been enough time for human civilization to advance to a level beyond where we are now, and then being totally destroyed and start again from Neanderthals or from cavemen, and with no folk memory of what went before and no trace of the civilization that was destroyed, and over the next several thousands of years build it up again. I mean, this was 5,000 years ago, wasn't it? This city was built.
Something like, I mean, it was about 2,500 years ago that they reckon the devastation took place. Sorry, no, it was about 2,500 BC. So so 4,500 years ago that the devastation took place. Coming up on 5,000. I've heard this theory before. This sort of cyclical technological thing, but here's the thing: if you're that technologically advanced, if our civilization died out tomorrow, you've got to believe, like, in 5,000 years' time, you're still going to get evidence because of all the steel and glass and concrete. You'd be unearthing these places, and they wouldn't be stone structures where your water supply is coming from a well or a stream. You'd have evidence of plumbing, but not so do you know what I'm saying? You'd have evidence of the technology if the technology was around. I know it has been put forward, this theory that maybe just people developed a way of splitting the atom back then. I really struggle with that one.
Is there any kind of natural phenomenon that could cause that? I mean, we discussed the meteorite strike in Siberia in 1908, which caused massive devastation, with no crater, but allegedly caused by something just passing through the atmosphere, a kind of a flesh wound in terms of meteorite strikes.
Well, if we look at the largest meteorite strike that I'm aware of, the one that basically wiped out the dinosaurs. Even then, it wasn't the meteorite strike itself or asteroid strike. It was the dust cloud that was raised into the atmosphere that killed everything off. So, in terms of natural events that cause sudden destruction, the closest I can think of would be volcanic. Now, I have heard it said that Yellowstone Park in America is basically overdue by about 40,000-50,000 years. A massive eruption that'll most likely wipe out half of humanity.
It was only fairly recently, wasn't it, that they went looking for, well, where's the actual, we know it's volcanic, but where's the actual chimney? Where is the volcano itself? And then after some study realised it's the whole park.
And if that thing goes off, which it's going to at some point, that's going to be that's a world-ending event, an apocalyptic event. That's probably the closest level I can think of to what we're talking about here. But again, you don't get this sudden vaporize, and it's the radioactivity. That's the thing I keep coming back to in my head. Yes, devastating things happen. Again, I mentioned Pompeii as an example, and again, that's volcanic related. But no, it's the radioactivity I keep coming back to in my head. But here's the thing. If we accept that it was an atomic explosion, and there's no signs, there's no evidence, there's nothing to point to humanity having the technology to do that at the time, because you don't get that by banging rocks together.
No.
You look at the technology that's required for us to split the atom now, It's huge technology. You can't do that in your back garden.
No, and in fact, I've heard it said that it's very difficult to build a nuclear weapon just by following the instructions. It's the sort of thing. It's almost like a catch-22. You have to have done it before to be able to do it.
Somebody somewhere must have done it the first time.
Yeah, someone did it the first time, but it's extremely difficult to do.
So the chances of 5,000 years ago, they're living in these. We can all picture 5,000 years ago what life was like.
I found on Reddit something that perhaps goes against that. So first, every place on Earth has traces of radioactivity. The Earth is radioactive.
Yes.
Second, Mohenjo Daro is not notably radioactive. The claim turns up in the context of claims of ancient nuclear warfare and the supposed destruction of Mohenjo Daro thereby. A common specific claim is of radioactive skeletons with 50 times the normal level of radiation in skeletons, as claimed in D.H. Childress' Technology of the Gods. Source: this claim has been tracked. Lots of papers say specifically an error in the science literature. Gorbowski cites a paper by A.V. Lebedinsky and Eugene Nefedov, Problems of Radiation Safety in Cosmic Flights, in 1962. So, according to recently reviewed data, in the ribs of a man who lived 4,000 years ago, the radioactivity was approximately 50 times higher than in modern man. So is it really that people? It was just a more radioactive place than we're used to.
Okay, it's not in my nature to be instantly dismissive, but talking about something on Reddit, which isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, even Wikipedia's like more reliable. And
I mean, it is quoting sources, but I'm just trying to think of another explanation other than people from another planet launching a nuclear war.
But to be fair, in our discussion, we haven't mentioned radioactive skeletons at all. In fact, the radiation that I'm talking about comes from the ground itself, and is at the what it says an archaeologist called Davenport who did a lot of the studies, and he identified what he believed to be the epicenter of the explosion. Now, this is where the radiation levels are at their highest. If it was simply the case that there was just much higher background radiation at the time, it would be consistent all over the place. You wouldn't get pockets of it.
Wouldn't you? Okay.
Surely not. So, yeah, and given the half-life of these things, we'd still have them. We'd still have the same radiation. So,
would we? I mean, what is the radioactive half-life? It's in tens of thousands of years, isn't it?
I mean, so, yeah, it exactly. It varies depending on what material you're talking about.
Ancient aliens debunked. Let's have a little look at this.
That's okay. That's a random thing to say in the middle of a radio show. I'm assuming you're reading something, are you?
Yes, I am.
Because our listeners won't know that.
Yes, I'm reading. I just found a website called Ancient Aliens Debunked, and it's quite a dense text. It's saying, it's written quite colloquially. It's saying, right there we have a concise reference to radiation poisoning, nuclear fallout, and those texts are thousands of years old. The Mahabharata actually doesn't say any of that. These exact claims about the hair and nails falling off and an explosion brighter than 1,000 suns have been repeated by ancient astronaut theorists so many times that they think it's true. But the origin of this line was from a French book called Morning of the Magicians. no one that makes that claim will actually cite where in the Mahabharata this claim appears, which makes it difficult to call them out. Because the Mahabharata contains over 1.8 million words.
But I'm going to say right there. So the Mahabharata is one. It's a Sanskrit epic tale, and yes, it is claimed phrases like explosions that are more brilliant than 1,000 suns. Absolutely. But it's not just the Mahabharata, it's also the Ramayana as well, which is a separate document. What they talk about is this idea that the god Vishnu comes down to battle a mortal who has become too powerful, effectively. Now, I know we've talked in the past about this idea that gods from legend may have been extraterrestrials, sort of guiding or interfering with human life. So, if that hypothetically was the case, then yeah, a nuclear explosion would certainly do it. The translation that I'm given to understand from the Ramayana says a single projectile charged with all the power in the universe, an incandescent column of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns, rose in all its splendour. It was an unknown weapon, an iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death which reduced to ashes an entire race.
Is that a translation from a religious text?
That's the translation from the Ramayana that I've been given. Now, this is someone else who's translated it, so it's not, it's not me that's done that.
I mean, I think with any kinds of religious texts, you're always on dodgy ground, aren't you? Because they're not purporting to be true. Often they're parables. They're cautionary tales there, and with maybe a little bit of history mixed in.
Well, that's it. It's an interpretation of what happened from the perspective of, it was a god. An iron thunderbolt. Now, in the case of Mahenjo Daro, I have heard a different theory, which is that it is actually evidence of time travel, as opposed to simply, aliens. That, for some reason, someone's gone back in time and set off a nuclear weapon.
Well, Stephen Hawking,
who knows,
a physicist who I admire, if not entirely understand, but I know that he said that time travel backwards is possible. You could build a time. I think it involves travelling at near the speed of light. But if it's possible, but if you built a time machine, you would not be able to go back in time beyond the time when you built that machine. So if I built a time machine now, in 10 years' time, I'll be able to use it to come back to now, but I wouldn't be able to go back to yesterday.
Okay, but that's based on the physics that we understand today.
That's based on the physics we understand today. And the application of that would be that if we're travelling intergalactically, which we would need to travel at the speed of light in order to be able to do, by doing so, you would go forward in time. So if you took a trip to Alpha Centauri, which took you a year travelling at the speed of light, and then another year to come back, when you got back to Earth, you would find that far more than 2 years had elapsed. That 20 or 30 years would have elapsed while you've been away. So that's when you need the time machine as you're coming back to go back to to at least a time when people can remember when you set off.
That's the premise of the original Planet of the Apes, isn't it?
That they end up in the future, because they've been travelling so fast, The The Planet of the Apes. I remember when it came out in the cinemas, and it had the worst ever. Apologies to any viewers who haven't seen Planet of the Apes or aren't aware of it. I doubt if there are many. But
it's 1970s. If you're not ready for spoilers yet, there's something wrong.
I mean, I'm old enough to remember when the Charlton Heston movie came out in 1968. I was at junior school. We were all really excited about it. Some kids had seen it, and of course, everyone wanted to know what they'd seen. But you'd see the poster outside the cinema, and it would have this sort of collage of all these different things: the apes and Charlton Heston with his rifle and whatever. And right there was the Statue of Liberty half buried in the sand. I mean, talk about spoiler.
Oh dear, that's funny. Okay, I mean, just to sort of, I suppose, close the lid on the whole time travel thing. I've heard this theory that aliens are not actually aliens, that they are us, evolved from the future, coming back in time to. I suppose like anthropologists would, to study us. So I'm not. I don't want to rule that out, but the idea that we, as we are now, going back in time, and I'm not buying into this. But I can believe if aliens were heavily involved in dealing with humans, as indeed the Egyptian culture suggests in some ways, as obviously the Indian cultures suggest in certain ways, and American Indians suggest in certain ways, and so on and so forth. Native Americans. If that is the case, then I can believe, some human has got hold of some technology they shouldn't have got hold of, and that city needs to be wiped out to prevent them from using it. I can see that happening. That's pretty much what is, or an interpretation of what is suggested in the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. That's effectively what happened, but just using words like gods and things. But it's time for our summary then. So you don't sound overly convinced at alien intervention in Mohenjo Daro.
No, I'm not entirely convinced that the evidence of a nuclear exchange of some sort is compelling, and even if it was, I can't think the origin of it might be. But I'm not seeing War of the Worlds. Human civilization was wiped out by visitors from another planet.
I think, for me, when you're going back this far back in time, 4,500 years, sort of plus, I think it's almost impossible to tell what really went on. I do think that the fact that there's enough evidence that we raise questions in the first place is quite interesting. I doubt we will ever know the truth of it. Sadly, I think the chances of that are very, very unlikely. But I also don't think this should be dismissed that readily. But what do you think, listeners? Is there some other rational explanation for Mahenjo Daro that we've completely and utterly missed? Could it be that Neil is right and indeed there are other explanations? Or do you side with me that there's been some sort of intervention from otherworldly beings? Do let us know by the usual methods. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter by searching Aliens Explored. Or, of course, you can visit our website, aliensexplored.com. And if you do, wherever you listen to your podcasts, do leave us a review, because it's what fuels this whole thing and helps us get the word out to more and more people and keeps us going. But don't forget to join us next week when we'll be discussing things rather more recent in living memory for most people, or for many people at least.
For some people, some of our listeners.
For some people, some people might be talking to right now. We will be discussing the assassin. I'll try that again. We will be discussing the assassination of J.F. Kennedy, and was it connected with UFOs? Join us to find out on Aliens Explored. In the meantime, keep watching those ancient archaeological sites in the skies.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye. Aliens Explored is a Fecal Films production in association with Juicy Falls. Music by Darren Mafucci and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Twitter or Facebook by searching Aliens Explored, or visit us on aliensexplored.com.